Good afternoon, everyone. Is it afternoon? Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me. So, lots to talk about today. So, let's just jump straight right in. Let's not waste your time. So, I think the news of the day, guys, is what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. You've got the Russians really bombarding the Ukrainian energy system, the energy grid. Again, I'm not going to say I told you so or anything, but if you look back literally through my previous videos when I talk about how vulnerable these energy grids are. Now, obviously, I don't mean European, Western, UK energy grids are going to come under such bombardment like the Ukrainians have. But what I do mean is once these things are broken, they become very difficult to get back online because there's so many intricate parts, so many transistors and all this sort of stuff. And it's very difficult to source them, especially if, they're old, like the UK's energy grid is. So that's what's been happening in Ukraine. Also, I came across an article from the 30th of May, which kind of ties together what we've been saying on this channel about the F-16s and how before I put dates on things, and I've got some dates for you today actually. I put dates on things when I'm pretty confident. When I put I don't like putting dates on things because like I said that the Russian invasion the 2022 invasion, I said it would kind of happen mid-February, but I said that like maybe a year before it happened, and and then when it didn't happen mid-February, when it happened like late to mid-February, people were saying, "Oh, Sean, you said it was going to happen on the 14th," and I was like, "Well, yeah, I said it was going to happen on the 14th like months and months and months ago." I didn't realise how how warm that particular winter would have been. If it had had a colder winter, I think I'd have been right on the money. Anyway, so that's what's been happening in Ukraine, guys. Basically, Russia's been targeting the energy system. Why? Because everybody needs energy. When you take out the energy system, you take the whole population out, and it causes this, what did we say? I forgot it. What am I thinking, guys? What am I thinking? The cauldron of chaos. It creates this cauldron of chaos where nobody's got electricity, so that has a knock-on effect to generators. Generators need fuel, and then we can't have fuel for vehicles, so we're putting it in our, to light our homes and etc. So that's kind of what's been happening. Now, I want to read you just a quick half a paragraph here from basically what Sergei Lavrov said about the F-16s being sent to Ukraine and then being flown. So again, I've said this for quite a while now. I've said we need to look when these F-16s are deployed and where they're actually being deployed from, because that is a huge stepping stone for Ukraine. Basically, from being able to fire missiles back to being able to now fly, aircraft that can be nuclear armed. Whether they're nuclear armed or not, it doesn't matter. The reality is you can pretty much nuclear arm anything, including a truck. But the fact is, you've got to look at this from the Russian perspective. NATO is now giving Ukraine nuclear capable aircraft. So let me just read this to you guys real quick. Russia has issued a stark nuclear warning over the delivery of F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. We've said this for a while. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accused the US of irresponsible brinkmanship, declaring that Moscow views the supply of F-16 as a nuclear signal from NATO. Kind of what we've been saying on here for a while. Lavrov threatened to lift restrictions on Russia's nuclear arsenal, suggesting that these aircraft will meet the same fate as other NATO weapons. Destruction. They will meet the same fate. Destruction. So, why I'm saying this to you now, guys, okay, because Sergei Lavrov, he's kind of, he's one of the more competent Russians that they have, working for them. The way the Russian system works, Russians will surround themselves with people they trust rather than people who are competent. And that has its pluses and it has its minuses. Obviously, when there's times of war like this, kind of a lot of minuses, because you get mass amounts of corruption, you get people stealing things, and nobody can do their job. In peacetime, when you're scared of being overthrown, when you're scared of an assassination, you've got people around you you trust, they're your friends, so they're not going to do it. So, it has pros and cons. But the reason I wanted to bring this article to you guys is, you know, it's just confirmation and, you know, proof of what we've been saying for the longest time on here is happening. So the next thing realistically we need to look out for is when these F-16s are being used. How are we going to know? Don't worry guys, it will be all over the media. Every man and his dog's going to know. Kind of like the old joke, how do you spot a pilot, an old military joke. How do you spot a pilot in the cookhouse? Don't worry, he'll tell you. Sorry guys, I'm here all day. Anyway, so what I want to do now, guys, is a little bit different. I want to read a translation that I've had to do. So I'll put the original text in the link to this in the description to this video. But I had to translate this from Russian, so forgive me if the phraseology is a little bit different. But what it talks about is basically when Andrew Blinken went to Ukraine, they had some secret meetings. Now, you can take this with a pinch of salt if you want. Where I got it from, I trust the source that I got it from. So take it with a pinch of salt, guys. If anything of this happens, we'll know it's correct. If not, we'll see, you know, we'll just take it for what it is. So, okay, there we are. Yeah. The West, the Russian Federation and China have a plan to end the war in Ukraine, but now the negotiations have reached a dead end. This is what the former advisor of the President's office, Alexei Arestowich, I may be butchering that name, guys. We'll call him. I'll put all the information in the link in the description. Alexei Arestowich. We'll call him Aries. That's what he says referring to the words of US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Did I say Andrew before? I meant Anthony. Who spoke behind closed doors, here it is guys, who spoke behind closed doors before European politicians. Note that the US and EU did not officially confirm such information or the fact that Blinken had this speech at all. So basically this has been a secret meeting behind closed doors. And guys, you know, we shouldn't, as the normal public, as the civilian population, we shouldn't, you know, and it's dangerous that we have running commentary on what's happening in the world. But there's some things that need to be kept from us because they do, it's kind of secret stuff. So whether this happened or not, it doesn't, you know, to me it's not far-fetched of the imagination. According to Aries, the US, France, China and Russia as probable guarantors of future peace. I think they don't mean China there. I think they just mean the United States, France and China. Have privately discussed a plan to declare a truce from the 15th of July, which should first become temporary, then eternal, because after a month of no firing, no one will want to return to the war. So, I was out in Ukraine when there was the Minsk agreement, the Minsk 2. It didn't have any difference at all. People were still firing. I personally, on a personal level, I don't think even if Zelensky and Putin said, you know, we're not fighting anymore, I think there's that many weapons, that much tension there at the moment. I think fighting would continue. Not in the intensity that it does now, but in you're gonna have like what's the word I'm looking for? You're gonna have kind of a Northern Ireland scenario when you're gonna have different groups and different factions fighting among each other. But that's the date to look for there, guys. 15th of July. Further, according to him, so this is the Aries guy, Arestowich. Further, according to him, the peace negotiations should begin, which would lead to some kind of acceptable result. But this plan came to a dead end for two reasons. First was the position of Zelensky, whose departure Moscow made one of the conditions for settlement. We wrote more about... So I'm not sure what this means on the translation, guys, here. I think they're talking about how they don't see Zelensky as the actual leader because he's not been elected and he's been in longer than that term should allow. The second reason for the impasse, now this is the more important one and the interesting one. The second reason for the impasse in the secret negotiations of the four states was Moscow's demand to recognise in writing the new borders of the Russian Federation along the current front line. So basically they wanted, you know, Putin's annexed areas or the areas that they're fighting in, he wanted to claim that for himself. Moreover, this recognition should not come from Zelensky, so that kind of makes sense, who was called illegitimate in the Kremlin. So the Russians don't see Zelensky as the leader. And not from Joe Biden, who may soon lose power, and then would have to negotiate with another US president. So basically, they're wanting this, you know, they're going to want this agreement now to come from Trump, who may be the next president, and they're going to want it from somebody other than Zelensky. So they're going to need this some sort of, you know, authorization on this potential peace deal, and this is kind of why it fell through. Among other things, Aristov explains the lack of interest of major powers in the summit in Switzerland, which is being convened by Ukraine with this impasse. So what he's saying there is, also apart from these two issues that, you know, they don't want Putin wants basically the annexed areas, the areas that he's claimed by force, to be recognised legally. And he wants this to be recognised by someone other than Joe Biden, because Joe Biden won't be the president, and then you could have problems. And I think we're that close to an election now anyway, you know, they want more legitimacy with that. And then he talks about the lack of enthusiasm for major powers to go to this Switzerland summit where, you know, the Ukrainians are holding. So that's in a nutshell, guys. I'll take the whole original text. I'll just drop that in the description to this below, guys. Let me know what you think, guys. Okay, it's really interesting now as well. I got another article here. I think not there. Where is it? About sabotage in Europe. About the fact that, you know, the Russians are now planning sabotage attacks on, you know, mainland Europe. And people are really worried about this now because it's come out that there's a network of Russian, you know, an apparent network of Russian saboteurs, we call them Tatushkas or whatever. But, you know, if you look back through the news for the rest of this year, there's already been, you know, assassination attempts on Ukrainians. You know, the ones that are coming to mind at the moment are the Ukrainians that they'd been injured in the war and they were back in Europe, and I believe they were stabbed by, you know, a Russian guy. So we know these people are operating. If you look into the, remember when there was the, excuse me, remember when there was the grain issue on the Polish border when the trains were coming in full of Ukrainian grain? You know, if you look into that, there's people talking about that being, you know, Russian plants that were in there, you know. So the protest started peacefully, then the agent provocateurs went in, the Tatushkas, and they turned that peaceful protest into, you know, into a more aggravated one, where some of these carts got, it was a big thing, guys. Some of the, what am I talking about? The, what would you call it if it's on a train? A cart? A stage, a coach, let's call it a coach. So basically the transport, the doors were broken open and it spilt grain all over. That had a massive knock-on effect for people getting in and out, because there's only one train route in and out of Ukraine at the moment. So, you know, we're really in difficult times. And I think these dates are absolutely key. And again, I keep saying it, the one to look out for right now is when these F-16s are going to be used. Maybe they won't be used, you know. Maybe, you know, people will back down and not use them. But I think at some point they have to, because if you keep an eye on the news, what you'll find that the Polish, they keep saying, and they're pushing for all the time, to use Polish F-16s to fly over Ukraine to defend the skies. Also, it's in the news about whenever Russia launches a missile over to Ukraine, Poland has to scramble their jets. Now, and I get the argument, as a moral issue, you're a Polish pilot in your F-16 and you can see the missiles coming, you can press a button, send a missile off and destroy that missile and save people on the ground, but you're not allowed to because, you know, bureaucracy. Now, once we cross that river of Polish aircraft being able to fire and take out these missiles from the sky, then the next step will be, okay, well, if we're doing that anyway, can Poland fly over Ukrainian airspace? Right, okay, they can fly over Ukrainian airspace. Then where are the Ukrainian F-16 gonna, where they're gonna operate from? Probably the same airfield. Why? Because if the Polish are already operating F-16s, then on the ground there, they already have servicing crew, they have spare parts, they have logistics, they have the fuel capacity. They have all the stuff already there, so it makes sense for them to fly the same sorties. Okay. So when the Polish start to say, right, we're turning our transponders off, if they even use them, then how can anyone tell whether it's a Polish F-16 leaving that airfield or a Ukrainian F-16 that's leaving that airfield? And then when it's flying over Ukraine, how can anyone tell whether the missiles are coming off or taking out, incoming missiles, whether they're sending any missiles out at all, or whether the missiles are going and striking targets in Russia? So the water's getting murkied, and the Russians know this, they're not stupid. And that's why as we're moving closer and closer, these nuclear threats, especially the one by Sergei Lavrov, becomes more prominent, and you kind of, when people like Sergei Lavrov say things, you kind of have to take notice, because, he's got a lot of sway within the Russian Federation. Guys, thank you for listening to me. I'm going to get back to you later on today with another video, but let me know what you think in the comments.